Hey everyone, I'm Gary. We're going to talk about the 10 essential guidelines to fast-tracking the process components. But before I do, I actually want to kind of feel the room on their feelings about the process components, so get ready. First question, if you had to score yourself, your team, or your business on how well it was doing on the process components, on a scale from 1 to 10, what would that be? So a 10 would be, oh, you already got the answer ready, 4 out of the gate. I'm going to give you the scale though, but I love the enthusiasm, awesome. 10 would be you've got all your processes documented, you've trained your staff on them, you've got the accountability piece to make sure they're following it, and you've got a system in place to repeat this over and over again as to continuously improve. That's a 10. A 1 would be you've got nothing documented, nobody's trained, your staff is doing whatever they think is right, and you don't really have a system in place. So I'm going to ask you with a show of hands, who would score themselves between 1 and 3? Okay, 4 and 6. Okay, the majority, 7 or above? Awesome, we've got some masters in the room as well. I want you to consider the following. What would it mean for your business if that score went up in the next 2 weeks? What would improve in your business? And so, Joe, if you don't mind just kind of getting an answer, is anyone willing to maybe share what they feel, how their business would improve in the next 2 weeks if they went from a 3 to a 7 or a 7 to a 9?
Improve client experience and higher utilization rates.
Okay, improving client experience, better utilization.
Yeah, less staff time wasted on training and reviewing over and over again the same things.
Okay, so reduce new hire training. One more?
Better employee morale.
Okay, awesome. All great answers. Obviously, we're going to cover a lot of this stuff because the process component is probably the hardest one, but also the most valuable one. And I'm going to explain how to fast track to those outcomes. Final question though, what's holding you back to getting that score up? What has been the reason why you haven't gone to an 8 or a 9? What is that repeating element? And I'm going to take an educated guess, and again, I'm just going to ask for a show of hands. Is that reason, has it to do with not finding the time, resource, or the bandwidth? Show of hands. Okay, who thought of, I don't know where to get started, I don't have the expertise or the right guidance? Show of hands if that was your number 1. All right. And final thing is, I'm not sure I've got the right team or the buy-in from my team members to help me out with that specific one. All right. Something went wrong there with slides. I'm now presenting apparently Vision Link, 3 secrets to EOS compatible employee incentive plans. I'm not very well educated on that, so. But yeah, all of that typically relates to you not finding the time. There's always another fire to put out. You know how important it is, but you just never get around to it. And so you've all gotten an exercise sheet, so you can follow along with me today to kind of show you how you can improve that score, not just in 2 weeks, but in 45 minutes with me today. While I give the team a couple of seconds to get the slides back up, what we tend to see is all these reasons that came up, time, resources, not knowing where to start, maybe not having the buy-in from everyone. Typically that leads to you seeing the process component as this huge, unsurmountable mountain. It's going to take you a lot of time to get up, you're going to need the right equipment, the gear, and it just feels very hard to see the top of that mountain, right? Now I want you to think about the following. A professor in psychology actually did some research at the University of West Virginia around perception. And so what he did, he asked his students about, hey, there's this mountain near campus. I want you to estimate how steep that hill is. And so the majority of his students answered, oh, we believe it to be about 20% inclination rate. However, the reality was it was much closer to 5%. So almost all of his students overestimated the inclination rate of the hill. There was one group of students who got much closer to 5%. Those were student athletes. And the reason they saw it closer to reality is because they were much better trained. They felt more confident in their endurance to actually get up the hill. And so my point being is that my goal here today is to give you that feeling of endurance, a feeling of being trained, of having the confidence to not see it as this huge mountain, but as this hill that you can walk up to and just start improving your business on. I feel like I'm going to have to do this all from the top of my head, which is fine. Do you want me to keep going or keep going? Okay. Let me take my cheat sheet here with me then. So one of the first things that, second slide was I'm Gary. Told you that already. Flew in from Europe, Belgium to be here. Was a long flight, about 17 to 18 hours, but so grateful to be in sunny San Diego. It's raining in Belgium. If you don't know what Belgium is, I don't blame you. It's a very small country in Europe, although we are very well known for chocolate, beer, French fries, a lot of food stuff. I don't know why. But yeah, I am the CEO of Whale. Obviously, I'm going to help you with process today, but we also have software that helps you with that. All right, I'm a father of 2 children as well. They're little gremlins. I do not feed them after midnight nor bathe them because they turn into little monsters. Anyways, let's get started. We actually, one of the slides is it skips exercise 1, but the first thing I want you to do, because this worksheet is something that you can bring home back to the office, you can share with other managers or people that you want to assist you with the process components, and this kind of acts as a framework for you to just do the simple steps and get to improvements. But the first thing I always suggest you to do is decide why. Why are you going to do this? And you already answered this. Like, what is the outcome of an improvement of that score on a process component? If you went from a 4 to a 7, what would that mean for your business? That's your why. That's why you need to be doing this. Because I can guarantee you're going to go back to the office, you're going to get into the weeds of operations again, and again, it's going to drop on that priority list, and it's, again, not going to get done. So keep that why front and center. All right, back on track. Not quite yet. Just skip to the third one, I believe. Oh yeah, no, leave it at that. Ultimately, it all has to do with this, consistency. A consistent business is one where there's a great foundation for growth, because it's easier to start your career in a consistent business because they're going to train you more consistently. It's going to be much clearer what they expect from you. A consistent business is typically way more profitable. Why? Because it's less people dependent. It's not a bad thing, but when you sell your business at certain points, they're going to want to know that it's not founder or manager dependent. At the same time, a consistent business allows you to do more with potentially less. You're just going to be more effective at running your operations. And finally, a consistent business is just way more fun for everyone. I mean, less mistakes made, happier customers, better satisfaction all around, not just from your clients, but also from your staff. Next slide, please. Cool, so this is the name of the game of today's presentation, a simple framework. It does not need to be complicated to improve on process. There's 3 big components we're going to talk about today. One is documentation, probably the hardest one, but again, we'll go through it step by step. We'll talk about the training part of the process component, and then the manageability parts. And I'm going to show you how you go from 0 processes to process hero in just 2 weeks. All right, next slide. All right, starting with documentation. Yeah, move right along. Other slide, please. Okay, so we talked about this, set a goal. When we're talking about the process components, we tend to talk about company-wide clarity. That's what you want to do with core processes. You want to make sure everyone understands how the different functions in your business all kind of connect together. So I'm going to mainly focus this presentation on that goal, but obviously we already heard from some of you that it might have to do with less mistakes, higher customer satisfaction, delegate and elevate. If you're a small business owner, you're doing it all yourself, you want to start pushing some work off to someone else, having processes documented that people can follow is going to help you there. Or reduce ramp-up time, which this gentleman referred to. If you're going to hire a lot of people or you're experiencing turnover, in that case, again, this is going to help as well. Okay, I want you all to look at your worksheet, so you'll be able to kind of follow along. Obviously, you do not need to. You can bring this home as well. But what I want you to do is think about one process that you feel is going to have the biggest impact for your business if you had it documented tomorrow. So what is that process name? What would you refer to if you talked about that process? And this is a small thing, but it's important. Once you name it, you need to make sure that everyone refers to it in the same way. Because if I'm going to talk about the HR process and my coworker is going to refer to the people process, it's going to have some disconnect. It's going to get harder. So agree on a single name. Make sure everyone refers to it in the same way. So you can put that down in exercise 1 as how should everyone refer to this process. Second is process description. Again, kind of follows in making sure there's clarity. If you had to describe it with like just one sentence, what would that process sound like? Pretty easy stuff, right? But that gets you through exercise number 1 and kicks you off on this journey. Exercise 2 is about major steps. Biggest issue I see when people start this journey is they think that they need to end up with a 750-page operation manual. Please do not create that document. Nobody wants to look at that monster. Nobody's going to read that. So we're going to focus on the 20%, the 20% that gets you 80% of the way. And so typically that will refer to as to 5 to 10 major elements in that process. And so I'm going to use, and you can skip to I think slide 5 or 6 if we got that up and running. I'm going to use the HR process. No. I'm going to okay. Let's go back. Yeah, so 5 to 10 steps. If you had an HR process, the major steps would be, how am I going to source candidates? Sourcing. How am I going to interview candidates? Step number 2. How am I going to offer them a proposal? 4. How am I going to train them? And so on, and so on. And so having those 5 to 10 major steps listed is going to help you kind of create that first outline of what that process looks like. Where are we here? Yeah, so we had this. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, okay, perfect. So map the 20%. Focus on common and repeatable. That's a good one. I see too many businesses try to map literally everything that could potentially happen within that process. If it doesn't happen daily or weekly, it's not common nor repeatable. So just focus there, not on the exceptions nor the use or edge cases. Keep it short and concise. You've got an example here. I've got my HR process lined up. These are just one words, but it's clear. I'm going to talk about sourcing, interview, hiring, orientation. Do not make it more difficult than it needs to be. Ideally, this is a good tip, is you create this glossary of terms for everyone to kind of understand how you refer to things. So again, with the HR process, if we're going to call it that, it's going to be that, not the people process. Same things for these major steps. If you've got specific lingo in your business, just make sure it's outlined what that means. specifically for new hires when they come in. They might not be very familiar with that lingo. Having a source for them to refer to is going to help them out. But so the outcome of this specific exercise is you're going to have a sub-list of 5 to 15 major steps for each of your core processes. SMEs are subject matter experts. Do not think you need to do this all yourself. The more people you can involve, the better. And so subject matter experts do not necessarily need to be your managers or senior staff. They can just be people that have been around for 5, 10, 25 years that know this process in and out. They're going to be a great source to either help you create that documentation or at least give some critical feedback as to what you're doing and maybe offer some counterpoints. All right, so once we've got the major steps down, I don't know if does this work for you? It allows me to go forwards but not backwards. No. Yeah, go back to the 20%, please. Yeah, okay. So if I push once, does this move me forward? No, I'm going to let you just move us along. So yeah, next slide, please. Okay, prep work. This is not on your exercise sheets. These are just some good guidelines to follow up on. Told you about the glossary of common terms. It's going to take you maybe 25 minutes. You know probably all the most important terms by heart. So just have a simple list for people to refer to. One of the best tips I can give you is build a template for what good looks like. I'm giving you a lot of guidelines like keep it short, concise. I want you to have 5 to 10 elements per process, but other people that might contribute to this journey are not here. And so offer them that template, which could be this sheet, or it could be something that you create yourself to give them an outline of what good looks like. If we're going to document processes, this is the level of detail we're going to want to go into. Seems silly, but settle on a style guide. What you don't want to have happen is that everyone's going to kind of create it in their different way, and one is going to use bright orange, and the other one is going to use blue, and your branding efforts are all out of the door. Simple things, fonts, colors, just settle on that and make sure everyone follows it. Told you about identifying your subject matter experts. The sooner you do that, the sooner you get them involved in that journey, the easier the buy-in is from them to actually help with the contributions. So identify who has what knowledge in their heads, which is also going to help you with making sure if they leave that they actually transferred that knowledge over to you. Accountability, set a due date, a timeline as to if you're going to involve other people, hey, I'd love for you to do this by then. Do not leave it open because this is never going to be on top of their priority lists. If you're going to ask them nicely, obviously do, but also have that accountability piece. Make sure you've got this as a journey mapped out and a timeline that they can follow as well. All right, next slide, please. Hardest one. Adding the instructions. This is where you go into some of the detail. And here it's hard to kind of try and find out how far should I go. There's a couple of tips here. First of all, leverage what you already have. You probably have more stuff than you think you have. You could maybe have a recorded Zoom video somewhere of when you interviewed a new candidate. Maybe that serves as a first resource as to how you interview people. Just use that. Maybe you have a question list that you use every time you are interviewing someone new. Just have that as kind of a resource for people to turn to. So leverage what you already have. And this turns to exercise 3. As you go through that specific process, think about all the pieces, all the documents, all the videos, everything that you might have created before as something that you can just plug in. In addition, think about media selection. We all tend to think about documentation as this boring just text with a lot of bullet points and things that nobody really wants to read. Kind of like this. This is the boring version of it. But there's so much more media to be pulled in. Images, videos. Maybe you've got presentations on a certain process that you've given during a lunch and learn. Again, put that in there. It's going to give you a great foundation to further build on. So in your worksheet, you'll be able, for that specific process that you selected, kind of already map out which media formats you'll be able to use there. Again, collaboration is key in fast-tracking the process component. Involve others. It's not going to work if you're going to do it yourself. Next slide, please. How to save more time. I talked about the templates. A template is not only what good looks like, but maybe it's a predefined outline where they just need to fill in the blanks. If you're going to decide that your instructions is going to be at most a one-pager with a scope, process piece, and an outcome, great. Pre-build that template that they can just start filling in. It's going to save them time. It's going to ensure consistency again on how your documentation looks like across the board. The screen recorder, there's a lot of great technology out there. Will incorporates a lot of it, but almost everyone obviously is doing Teams, Zooms, Google Meets. Maybe just record your calls that relate to a specific process, or as you actually are doing a process, just turn on your screen recorder. Go through the process as you would always do, and there you go. You've got a video that you can now use as a resource for people to follow. My favorite, the junior transfer, because you're winning on both ends when you do that specific one. And so imagine you're going to hire someone new, let's say a new sales rep, and I don't really have any training or processes to refer to yet, so I'm just going to explain how their function works by having them sit next to me. Right, so this typically happens. We call that classroom training or on-the-job training. What you can do is ask that new hire to actually write out what you're explaining at the same time. The reason this works is because not only are they drafting your first version of documentation for you, but at the same time, they're going to remember everything you're saying much better, because that's how the brain works. Just listening, they're going to forget about 80% of what you said in those first few days. By writing it down, that percentage is going to be much higher. Finally, the AI assistants, unless you've been living under a rock, we all saw what ChatGPT can do, which is pretty awesome. It does a great job at many things, and one of it is helping you draft process documentation. There's simple prompts you can use, things like act as my company's COO. Your task is to create a first version of this process. Please write that out for me. And so what that's going to give you is basically not a blank page to stare at, but an outline that's pre-built. And you can make that industry specific. Name your industry. The more niche, the better. It's going to take that into account. Better yet, use the AI assistants in Whale. It's got that all pre-configured. All of these huge time savers. Do not reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of stuff out there that's pre-created. There's process templates that you can turn to. And again, this technology is going to help you with the fast tracking of it all. Next slide, please. We've documented a process. Right? We've gone through what that process is, what the description is. We've outlined major steps, 5 to 10 things that we do in that specific process. We've pulled in our existing resources to act as instructions, or we added some instructions ourselves. When you add instructions, keep it very high level. I'm going to assume you all hire smart people that do not need to be told how to do every single little thing. Keep it high level. Again, a one-pager per major step is a good place to start. You do not need more than that, because why? Once you start gathering feedback, they are going to tell you what's missing. If you go into way too many detail in the beginning, they're just going to ignore it. You're not going to get valuable feedback from them. And finally, once you start on that journey, use that technology again to assist you along the way and offer you guidance. All right. You've got all of this great documentation built. Yeah, go ahead. Let's package it. Let's put it in one single source. And this is I'm seeing this way too much. A lot of businesses create great documentation and scattered all over the place. Guess what? Nobody looks at it. Nobody knows where it is. Nobody knows where to find it. They give up. And so you need to put it in one single place and educate people to go to that place. Our clients tend to say when they get repetitive questions still asked, which are already in Whale, is, did you ask Whale? Did you look in Whale? Constantly refer to where the answers are instead of keep answering those same questions over and over again. A couple of things, when you package it, do define access levels. Who should be seeing what? Not just for, security's sake, maybe not everyone needs to see all the processes, but if you're going to show everything, every little procedure detail, they're going to get kind of blurred with too much information in front of them. So just restrict it to what they need to be seeing and focusing on. It's going to help them get to that information quicker at the same time. Use a hierarchy as you create these, we call these tiles. These could also obviously be folders or something else, but try to reflect a hierarchy that they're already familiar with. Maybe it's your departments, maybe it's your core processes that they already know. Maybe it's anything that just makes sense for them. Make it easy to access. This is probably the hardest one, but also the most important one. If it's going to take them more than 2 to 3 minutes to find the information, they're maybe going to do it once, maybe twice. Third time around, so they're just either going to wing it or turn to a chat tool to ask someone there, or just come at your office and say, hey, Joe, how did we go about this again? If it's not easy for them to find what they need, this is going to fail as a source for them to turn to. Make it easy to access means straight to the information, maybe for if you've got people on the go, make sure it's accessible on the go on a mobile device. Better yet, make sure it connects to them when they actually need it. And so that's what we're going to talk about in the training piece, but there's great systems out there that will allow you to kind of pinpoint the information at certain times in their journey with your business, which is going to make it more relevant for them to just consume than to search for it. So that's where you want to really take it to the next level. Okay, so you documented it, you put it in one single place. The next thing you want to do is make sure it doesn't go static and stale over time. It's another big challenge we see that businesses tend to overlook, is they create these great documents that people look at, and then in 6 months' time, your business has evolved, things change very rapidly, but nobody's thought about updating your documentation. And so people tend to then no more trust what you've built, no more look at it, and you spend all this time that kind of went to waste. So, simple solution. I think this is exercise number 6, yes. Decide on a process owner, someone who's going to be responsible for owning this specific process and set of sub-steps in your business. One person, not multiple. Why? Because if multiple people are responsible, no one is. So just one final person who's going to be accountable and being that process owner, and that person is going to be responsible for maintaining that over time. Obviously, they can ask others to contribute and reviewing things, but ultimately it's going to be on them to make sure it does. Second thing is what you want to do is set a review schedule. So our HR process might not change that much, so I might put my review schedule on once a year. What that's going to allow you to do is track how often the specific process owner should be revisiting that documentation and updating it. If, however, it's something that changes much more, maybe you've got safety processes which are very critical or something else that relates to operations, maybe put that on every 3 months. Make sure you've got that list, that they know what they are being asked to do, to actually come in, review it, and then hold them accountable. There's great software out there to hold people accountable. There's EOS 1, there's 90. This will allow you to kind of make sure that this work happens as well through tasks and to-dos, but make sure all of that is being tracked. Again, no accountability means this is all going to kind of go away. Training, yeah. All of this does not make sense if it does not reach your staff. It just means you've done a lot of work with no value to it. So the real value of the process component is when it connects to your staff members. And so one piece of it is training. And so if we go to the next slide, there's a couple of things to training. There's actually 3 layers. Yeah, perfect. One is orientation. We're not going to talk about that too much today, but orientation is typically what we refer to as an employee handbook. What are all principal guidelines? What's our policies? Where do we stand on our mission, values? Stuff that's important, obviously, not so much on the process side of things, but things that you do want people to be trained on. You want them to be a representation of your business, then they do need to know that stuff very well. Job-specific training. If you've got processes on specific functions and roles, this is where it starts to kick in. So if you expect them to ramp up very quickly, to become autonomous very quickly in their function and role, you do need to offer them training on those processes that they need to own. Just hope that they're going to figure it all out on their own. This is a mistake. It's not going to happen, or they're going to take so much time figuring it out themselves or bothering your senior staff with a lot of questions that they already probably have answers to. So training, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide, and then there's reinforcement. Even though you've trained your people in the first couple of weeks of them joining your business, here as well, no matter what method you choose to train them on, they're going to forget a lot of stuff. I mean, that's just how it works. We get into the weeds of our tasks and responsibilities, and Joe, who did a great job with giving me a 1-hour training on that specific process, I'm still going to forget about half of it 2 weeks later. And so I need a reinforcement. I need a way for me to have that information in front of them again when it matters. And so a good tip to have on training is do not overload people with too much information at once. Pretty sure that if you're going to hire a new person, you're not going to expect them from day 2 to own everything in their specific role. You're going to allow them to ramp up to certain responsibilities over time. Make sure that training is spaced out in the same way you expect them to take responsibility. So if you expect them in 2 weeks' time to do task A, just train them on task A. Doesn't make sense to already have B, C, and D covered. So space it out, make it easier on them to kind of consume it over time, and then repeat yourself with training reinforcement. And I think the next slide talks just a little bit about that. Yeah. So a couple of tips when you go into training mode. The more specific it gets, the better. Why? Because they're going to feel it's much more relevant to them, which kind of relates to spacing it out, make it relevant as to what you expect of them in a specific time frame. Do not overload them with processes that they're maybe going to need to operate once on every year. Doesn't make sense. Let them ask it when they need to do it. So just focus on, again, common and repeatable. Make sure there's a feedback loop present. No matter how you're going to train them, online, classroom, on the job, make sure they feel comfortable offering feedback. It's super valuable. They're going to tell you so many things you didn't think of, maybe on specific areas that you just haven't touched on, but they felt, hey, it's important for me to know if you want me to do this job well. Perhaps they're going to tell you, this is not enough information, you went too high level, but if you expect me to do this, these are a couple of gray areas where I just don't see it. Or they're going to already offer you suggestions on how to improve. Not all new hires are juniors. You're also obviously going to hire seniors. While you still want to train them on how you run your specific processes, they're probably already kind of come up with like suggestions to improve that specific process. So make sure there is a way for them to offer that feedback back to you. Track completion rates per employee. Obviously, if you're going to do classroom training, them sitting there is kind of completing the training, so that's an easy one. If you're turning to online training, make sure there's a system in place for you to kind of track that they completed all that stuff. I can't tell you how many companies have invested in learning management systems, build out these great courses for people to go through, and when I ask them, oh, and what is the average completion rate? Oh, I don't know. I haven't really tracked that at all, which is really the purpose of an LMS, to be able to track that. So if you go into that specific route, make sure you've got those reports in front of you. Again, it's going to tell you something on those first couple of weeks of that journey of that new hire with you. When I talked about reinforcements, having a retraining schedule becomes relevant. I forget things all the time, and I'm a process owner of certain things. I've developed a process, and even I sometimes forget what my best practices look like. So I have retraining schedules for things that I do day in, day out. Why? Because we kind of tend to steer away. We kind of sometimes over time tend to, oh, I'm going to do it this way this time. Maybe it's better. It's not. I've thought a lot about this process. I wrote it down for a reason. So having retraining schedules, just like we have with reviewing it for documentation's sake, this is going to allow you to make sure there's constant alignments. Where this starts to click together with the review process, so process owner reviewing a specific process over time, let's say every 6 months, typically what will have happened is that process will maybe have been modified over time. You found a couple of areas to improve on. You now updated that documentation. Guess what? You need to retrain people on that new process. And so having those two aligned, we're reviewing every 6 months, so probably we'll need to retrain everyone 6 months as well. And having that connected allows you to kind of embark on that continuous improvement loop, which I talked about in the beginning. This sometimes feels uncomfortable, like we're not in school anymore. Do we really need to test, quiz people, make sure that they're listening? A short answer is yes, not necessarily because you're not trusting them, much more because you're going to uncover specific gaps in different areas. First of all, testing people will give you a sense in, let's say I train 10 people on the same subject, they're all failing. Chances are it's not on them, it's on you. Probably the training you're offering them and then testing them on has not been adequate. So you've made it way too hard on them. So you've identified a gap for you to work on, which is offer better training, create better documentation. At the same time, maybe if you're just training one or two, and they're failing at these tests because you kind of want to make sure that they're just not glancing at the documentation and then moving on, so you want to make sure the comprehension is there. The cool thing with online training, which Will offers, is it's going to save you a lot of time back as a manager because you've made it repeatable. You've created kind of the documentation you want people to be trained on, so you can now set that in motion. All that time that you save back, not having to do it one-on-one or through a classroom training, you can now use to offer better one-on-one guidance. So let's say typically you might spend 8 hours a month training people on various topics. Let's say you win back 4 hours because you've automated in an online way. You've now freed up 4 hours to go more in depth with a one-on-one basis with people. And so they're going to feel much better supported. It's going to offer them much more value because you're narrowing down on the gaps that they have. And again, quizzes is going to uncover those gaps. Maybe they didn't really understand what you expect from them in that CRM system that you bought, and you want them to kind of follow the sales process, and it's going to tell you where to focus that one-on-one effort on. So in exercise 7, when you think about the process, because not online training isn't the Valhalla, it's not what you should always refer to, it's a combination of things. So you can decide on what's the best way for me to train people on, and then how often should I repeat that training. All right. Yeah. Guideline number 10 already. we actually already talked about this, so that's easy. Yeah, so regularly review those gaps in your subjects and team, continuously improve. Ideally, have stats in place to hold everyone accountable. Again, if you've got the reports on where they're maybe failing or the areas where your documentation is just a little bit too light, having that maybe once a month in your L10 meeting come up as a fixed topic is going to allow you to continuously find that improvement. And that's what you're aiming for with process components. It's not a one and done kind of thing. I tend to say that this, if you really want to do it well, you kind of need to culturally adopt a process mindset. It needs to be something that you as a business owner, manager, and an entire company believe in as a way to do better. And so once you have that, the flywheel I shared in the beginning, which says document, train, manage, actually becomes a flywheel. And the more you go through that loop, the more you'll accelerate your growth. And the cool thing about that flywheel is you can do it per process, per team, per department. Don't think you have to do this company-wide from day one. What we do with a lot of our clients is some teams are just a little bit further ahead than others. So they can go through that flywheel, those 3 steps, documenting, training, and manage, at their own pace, while the others are going at their own journey at the same time. So identify maybe who the team members or departments are that are already a little bit ahead. Use them as a perfect use case to show others how it's done, and have them go through the flywheel themselves. And ultimately, you're going to have all these wheels spinning, accelerating, and helping you become consistent. All right, those are the 10 guidelines to fast-track the process components. What I suggest you to do is use this as kind of a guideline, something to get started on. This can help you in just 2 weeks. We use this all the time. It's a framework we use as well when people adopt our software to kind of help them go from one step to another. There's a piece of software as well. I'm not going to sell you on this software today. If you want to learn more, go to our booth. But basically everything I shared with you, from the technology side of things, from the reporting, the accountability, the training, the documentation, all of that is embodied in this software. So if you want to accelerate that journey even further, Will is a great tool for you to learn more about. Starts entirely free, by the way. So even if you're kind of cost effective, which is great, there's a free version for you to get that journey started on. This is a pretty cool gadget. You can win it at our booth. The cool thing about this is not necessarily the Apple Vision Pro, but to win this, you can actually experience what Will would be able to do for your team, because it will walk you through our mobile app, kind of train you on what Will is all about, test you on some of the questions. By the way, it's just like a 5-minute thing to go through it entirely, so it doesn't take you a lot of time. If you score a perfect 100, you'll make a chance to win the Apple Vision Pro, but more importantly, it will show you how easy it is to actually maybe start training your team in a more modern way. We can skip that one. I think we can just go to I don't know, they don't need to score the session today. Okay. I was going to say, if you felt I did poorly, it's an 8. If I did moderately, 9. If I did great, it's a 10. We have 30 minutes saved with and without the slides today. I hope this was valuable. Do come and, oh, there you go. So it was 8, 9, or 10 that you need to score me on. I hope this was valuable. Come see me after at the booth number 8 to learn more about Whale. Thank you.